This is the new Z Flip 6. The Flip form factor has always carried a lot of compromises when compared to its conventional counterpart. But this year, they addressed a lot of it, like with much better cameras and bigger batteries. It still isn't perfect, but the Z Flip 6 is even more fun with its new software. And after living with it for 2 weeks, I find the form factor to have some benefits beyond just being cute and nostalgic. Starting with the design, this is definitely my favorite Z Flip. The back glass, hinge, and sides all became matte. Even the bezel around the main screen, which was glossy before, is now also matte. I love the new texture. It doesn't track fingerprints nearly as much, and it looks great. Another notable change is the hinge. It definitely feels more firm and satisfying now. On the last gen Z Flip 5, when fully opened, it's actually not perfectly flat. You can see a slight bend here. The new hinge improves on that, and the Z Flip 6 opens almost completely flat. I say almost because there's still just a little bit of wiggle room when you push on the hinge like this. However, the new hinge didn't actually give it any more dust resistance. It's now officially rated for IP48, but that's actually only against solid objects bigger than 1 millimeter. Only a rating of IP5 something would be considered dust protected. And also when you first boot up the phone, it does tell you that it's not dust resistant. But the main compromise of folding phones is having a crease right in the middle of the screen. The new hinge does actually help with this. If I run my finger on it side by side against the Z Flip 5, it's a noticeably shallower valley on the new phone. And sometimes you can even see that it's less steep, especially with these reflections here. But the thing is, anything besides a perfectly flat screen is visually noticeable. When you can see any sort of reflection, you can tell that the screen is obviously creased. But when there are no reflections, or if the screen is bright enough to mask all of the reflections, then the crease becomes almost not noticeable. And actually, the screen became much brighter this year, peaking at 2600 nits. It's just as bright as the S24 Ultra. Of course, this helps with outdoor visibility, but it also helps to mask the crease better than before. The anti-reflection coating is also surprisingly good for a folding phone with a built-in screen protector layer. It's as good as it is on the smaller S24, but it's no match for the S24 Ultra, which has this super dark coating. To be fair though, I haven't seen anything else with such a good coating. The other aspects of the Z Flip 6 screen are also very competitive, being 120Hz and OLED. And if you haven't used the Flip before, you'll be surprised by how tall it is. It's as tall as the S24 Ultra, but about the same width as the smaller S24. So the Z Flip 6 still feels easy to hold even if you have smaller hands. But when browsing the web, it feels like a larger phone, and you can easily swipe up to get two still very usable halves by splitting the screen vertically. However, a regular 16:9 video doesn't look bigger than on the smaller S24. Only ultra-wide movies make use of this wider aspect ratio effectively. Besides that, I do like the speakers being a slit now as opposed to tiny holes. But I'm not sure about the color-matched rings around the cameras. They kind of look like Wall-E's eyes. Also, the Z Flip 6 is practically the same thickness as last gen. But given that the battery increased from 3700 milliamp hours to 4000, and it now also has a vapor chamber, it's honestly an achievement that it's not any thicker. Another quirk of Samsung's folding phones is that they don't have an under-display fingerprint scanner. It's still on the power button, but it's very quick and accurate, so you can unlock the phone even before flipping it open. But the change I'm most excited about are the cameras. It's a night and day difference compared to the last generation, and it really starts with the software. Look at these photos side by side on the phone themselves. The one on the Z Flip 6 just pops out so much more. It looks like the same effect you get when you start playing an HDR video. The highlights in the photo taken on the Z Flip 6 uses the entire brightness capability of the OLED display, which makes it really look like it's popping off of the screen. Previously, when you looked at a photo side by side on a Samsung and iPhone, the iPhone photos tended to look more impressive since they were already using this trick. But now, the Samsung photos look just as impressive on the phone. On the hardware front, the selfie camera stayed the same, which is the one phone where I'm completely not concerned because you're probably only gonna use that for video calls. There are phones with much better selfie cameras out there. Here's the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and here's the S24 Ultra selfies, but none of them gets even close to the quality of the Z Flip 6's main camera. The main camera is a much bigger sensor with higher resolution and a better lens. Even though the S24 Ultra has one of the best selfie cameras, I think the results here speak for themselves. So if you want the best photos of yourself, this is the best phone to do it with. You can use a high quality main camera or even the ultra wide and frame up your shots with the cover screen preview. And in this case, the form factor comes in handy too. You can set the Z Flip down anywhere and prop it up at any angle. The software is pretty helpful too. You can show palm to have it take a photo. So if you're the type of person who would turn a regular phone around to try to get a nicer picture of yourself, you would love this. Also, if you like vlogging, this makes for a really compact setup with good stabilization. And actually, you can launch the camera directly from the cover screen. And here you can adjust the megapixel and aspect ratio as well as set a timer. It's also very easy to zoom in and out, and you can swipe between the regular photo, video, or portrait mode. However, the cover screen preview is still only available in the native camera app. I think it can become even more useful if third-party apps were to support it too, so you can film higher quality TikToks right in the app. Now, the Z Flip 5 actually had most of these form factor and software benefits too, but it was the hardware that really held it back. This year, the Z Flip 6 received a new 50 megapixel main camera, and it's quite a big improvement. It's not just higher resolution, but it's also a physically bigger sensor, and you can see the effect of it here. In this shot, I have the new Z Flip 6 and the Z Flip 5 side by side focused on me, and the background in the Z Flip 6 photo is just a little bit more blurry, and it does look nicer. At night, the larger sensor can gather more light, so it's less noisy and it does look marginally better. Even ignoring the high-res capability of the new camera and just leaving it in the regular mode, so 12 megapixels, which is probably how most people will use it, the quality is still noticeably better than last year. If you look at this, the grass here is a little bit more detailed, but the main difference comes in terms of the dynamic range. In this shot of me, you can see on the Z Flip 5, my shirt is just completely clipped to black, while some of the detail is still preserved on the Z Flip 6. And this is very similar to that of the S24. I'm glad that the main camera is finally on par with the S series. Putting it to the 50 megapixel mode does give you an even more detailed photo. Next to the 12 megapixel on the Z Flip 5, it's a pretty obvious difference. The other benefit of the high resolution main camera is zooming in. There's still no dedicated telephoto on the Z Flip, so all of the zooming is done by the main camera. At 2x, the photo still looks really good and much better than on the Z Flip 5. And take a look at the 3x photo next to the optical 3x camera on the S24. I'm pretty sure they developed some new processing algorithm for these zoomed in shots. The cropped in 3x zoom on the Z Flip 6 seems to have less noise, and the overall texture looks pretty clean and detailed. This is surprisingly close to the dedicated telephoto on the S24, but ultimately it does lack some resolution. The text here is still pretty readable on the S24, but it just looks like some weird AI drawing on the Z Flip 6. And here's what the Z Flip 5 looks like zooming in 3x. Yeah, the new Z Flip is so much better at this. Some of the improvement carries over to video as well. It has better dynamic range, which does mean it consistently takes better looking videos. But unlike the S24, which it shares the same processor and sensor with, the Z Flip 6 cannot shoot 8K videos. As for vlogging with it, I don't have much complaint about the stabilization. I can walk around and the footage is still smooth. But actually, I later realized that holding the Z Flip like this isn't the best for taking horizontal video. Because the sensor is vertical, when you're filming like this, it's cropping in on a vertical image, so it's lower quality and the field of view is smaller. Instead, you should turn the flip sideways and then adjust the aspect ratio. I also tried the auto framing feature, and I think with the 50 megapixel main camera, it's more useful now than last year since you can zoom in and still get decent quality, but it's still not the most reliable. Unlike the main camera, the ultrawide stayed the same, and that's a bit disappointing. It still looks pretty okay, but it's now really lagging behind phones like the S24, mostly because of its lack of ability to focus. With the S24's ultrawide, not only is the ultrawide sensor bigger, but you can also use it to take macro mode pictures. If you get too close to your subject, with the ultrawide on the Z Flip 6, it will be straight up blurry, as you can see here next to the S24. That's a shame. But this only becomes a problem when you get really close. Even with a fixed focus, everything is in focus starting at around half an arm's length away. So if you want to vlog with the ultrawide, your face will still be in focus. Beyond just the viewfinder, there's a lot more to the cover screen. It's exactly the same size, resolution, and shape as last gen, but it has more lock screens and widgets now, so it's more fun and a bit more useful. I really like these interactive cover screens. It almost feels like a snow globe. The emojis move around as you tilt the phone, and you can also make them bounce around. This one is so cute, but unfortunately right now, there are only 5 presets of this, and you cannot customize anything about it. Also, why would they put broccoli in 40% of these? Who wants bouncing broccoli on their cover screen? Samsung is known for customization, so it's really weird that you cannot adjust anything. Even changing the background color would be much nicer. But at least for these and for all other kinds of wallpapers, you can change the clock style, add the battery percentage, which I think should just be enabled by default, and even change the shortcut to be a different app or go to a specific widget. Besides that, you do get lots of options for the cover screen wallpaper. The frames are pretty cool, the subject pops out of them. There are also these informative ones that let you add some widgets right onto the cover screen. And this year, there's a new photo ambient wallpaper. You can choose your own photo and then it will apply time and weather effects to it based on your local time and weather. That's That's pretty cool. I also like these animated flower ones. They tick like a clock. I think they would look so cool as an always on display, but unlike on the S24 where you can have a dim wallpaper as the always on display, you can only have a clock on a black screen on the Z Flip. This is most likely because the cover screen doesn't have adaptive refresh rate, so lighting up more pixels would cost way more battery. As for widgets, there still aren't that many options. It just doesn't seem like many third-party apps are supporting it. But the ones that are there are nice, like Spotify, starting a timer, checking off some reminders. And if you have Galaxy Buds, the Buds Manager one is great too. And I'm glad that now you can group multiple ones into one page. Also, for faster navigation between all of the widgets, you can just pinch out to see all of them and then jump to the one that you want. By default, the cover screen also supports a few apps. And by a few, I mean very few. If you want to run any app on the cover screen, there's a fairly easy way to do so, just by downloading GoodLock Multistar, which is still made by Samsung. Since the cover screen is so short though, there's not really a point in doing that. For most apps, it's just so much better using it on the bigger main screen. I die like 50% faster in Crossy Roads on the cover screen. And some third-party apps just break on here. But for things that only take 1 to 2 steps, it can be helpful to do them right on the cover screen, like responding to some text messages. And there's even AI suggested replies now. It's also nice being able to toggle between ring and silent on the cover screen, but I do wish I can customize the quick settings just like on the main screen so that I can turn on my hotspot right from the cover screen. Overall, I've been using the cover screen more and I can feel that it's only 60 Hz, but that's not a big deal. However, I do wish that it's as bright as the main screen because when under the sun, it can be a little hard to see. And as for the rest of the software, it's a bit of a mixed bag between great features I use all the time and gimmicky AI stuff that feels like a solution looking for a problem. One customization trick that I love is setting different combinations of lock screen, home screen, and cover screen using modes and routines. Here, if I toggle on my custom mode, I can change all of my wallpapers instantly. And there are a few new AI features. They're currently only available on the new Flip and Fold, but they're probably going to go to other Samsung devices fairly soon. The new Portrait Studio is fun for 2 minutes. You try it on your friends and family once and then forget about it. Part of this is because it only stylizes your face as opposed to the entire image. The other new thing is sketch to image, and I think it's a great idea, but I feel like the AI's performance is not quite there yet. The stuff it generates often doesn't blend well into the photo, and sometimes it's unintentionally comical. So the new AI features are somewhat underwhelming. But overall, Samsung's AI features do add value. Like now I can quickly summarize a web page and do some fixes to my photos with the generative edit. Something that's been notably missing on Z Flips is Samsung DeX, where you can plug into an external screen and have a more desktop-like experience. The Z Flip 6 technically doesn't have DeX, like you can't find it anywhere on the phone, but you can get new DeX after toggling on forced desktop mode in developer options. I went in and tried it, and it's very similar to classic DeX. But strangely, there's no window snapping, and the taskbar for me seemed bugged with not showing my opened apps. If you really want to use DeX, I guess this is something. The reason given for why Z Flips never had DeX is due to thermal limitations, but given the new processor and the vapor chamber, there's really no reason that the Z Flip 6 can't have DeX because even in the thermal limited state, it's at least as fast as the S23 Ultra in most cases, and that had DeX. The Z Flip 6 has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 in every market, and also a bigger vapor chamber than the S23 Ultra, but in reality, it can only do so much. In comparison, the S24, which has the same processor and a vapor chamber that spans the entire height of the phone, is much more effective at dissipating heat. The vapor chamber in the Z Flip 6 is only in the top half of the phone, and there's just no way to effectively move heat from one half of the hinge to the other. So ultimately, in this 20-minute gaming benchmark, you can see that the performance of the Z Flip just drops off of a cliff much faster than the S24, and at the end of the 20-minute test, it's only performing about 80% as well. However, this is still a pretty big upgrade over the last generation, since the new processor is just so much faster, and you also get 12 gigs of RAM with the Z Flip 6. So even though the 8 Gen 3 can't reach its full potential inside the Z Flip 6, it still somewhat keeps up with the last generation flagship, the S23 Ultra. And the S23 Ultra is by no means bad at gaming now, so neither is the Z Flip 6. Although it's kind of weird having only one of your hands heat up. Overall, it's a fairly good gaming experience. You get this ultra widescreen feel. Another way Samsung eliminated the flip phone compromise is with the battery capacity. It's now 4,000 milliamp hours, the same as the S24. I tested it by looping YouTube videos, and after 2.5 hours, the S24 is at 85%, while the Z Flip 6 is at 83%. So basically the same. Maybe the Z Flip's bigger display is using a tiny bit more battery. And in the gaming benchmark, it consumed less battery, mostly because it's thermal throttling more. Overall, it's great that Samsung eliminated lots of the drawbacks with a foldable phone. The battery life is hardly a concern now, and the difference between using the main camera versus a selfie camera is huge. If you like selfies and vlogs, this is probably the best phone for it. The software is super customizable, which is fun. But for lots of people, it probably comes down to the crease. It's better, but definitely not invisible. If half of you watching this subscribes, I'll give away a new Z Flip 6.